Welcome to Payoff Pitch Live. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined as always by Sean Zerillo to break down the 10 games in the bigs here on Monday. We're also going to have Grant Neiffer coming in with his home run prop bets, so stick around for those dingers on his card. But first, I have a question for you, Sean. Is it white flag time down in Atlanta? Because the Braves were just swept by the Orioles. They now sit 13 and a half games out of first place in the NL East and 8.5 games out of a wild card spot. And it's not just the games, they also have, I want to say, 6 or 7 teams ahead of them in that wild card race. And some of them are clearly not going to be throwing up their own white flags. You got teams like the Giants and the Cardinals who are still very viable at this point in the season. They have aspirations to not only make the playoffs, but to make a deep run. So with all that ahead of them, or in terms of things they have to climb over just to get back into contention, it seems like they should be sellers here at the trade deadline approaching. And if they do go into fire sale mode, my question for you is, do they have anybody they can really move? Like Azuna is hitting what, a buck 70 since June 1st. This would be the lowest in terms of his trade value. So maybe they don't necessarily want to, make a move with him right now. And then they've said repeatedly, across the Atlanta Braves brass, everybody at the top of their organization, they are not trading Chris Sale. But is that ironclad, considering the fact that he has, an option on his contract, club option, I should say, for $18 million dollars in the 2026 season? Either of those players potentially on the move, and if not, can Atlanta do anything to bolster their farm system moving forward into 2026?
Even if they want to trade Chris Sale, I don't think he's going to be back off of the IL by the time the deadline rolls around in 3 weeks or so. So Chris Sale, had they wanted to trade him, had they changed their minds and decided to trade him, I don't even think they could because he's not going to be healthy by the trade deadline. They do have an $18 million option on him for next year. I would imagine their stance as an organization is don't do anything to make us worse in 2026 because they do largely still have this offensive core together. Would imagine they will fire Brian Snitker at some point, try to come into 2026 with new management. But yeah, Spencer Schwellenbach going down over the past week, Sale hurt as well, Reynaldo Lopez on the IL. This team just basically ran out of pitching, much like the Baltimore Orioles did. If I'm going to trade dudes off of this team, if I am the Braves GM, I'm looking to the bullpen because that is where you might at least find some amount of return for the arms that you're sending out. Raisel Iglesias is a pending free agent. Joe Jimenez has a team option or might be signed through next season. Pierce Johnson team option. Aaron Bummer signed through next year. So they have a number of arms at least that could have name brand value. Enio De Los Santos has 1 more year arbitration. If they just want to try to take these bullpen arms that may have some value and try to get something back for them and then rebuild the bullpen over the offseason and then come into 2026 with a much more viable competitive roster that hopefully has Strider, Sale, Schwellenbach, and Acuna all healthy going into the season. They only had 2 of those 4 healthy coming into this year. I think that would ultimately be the plan. The Ozuna trade is going to be really difficult to pull off because he's hitting so poorly, but also there's rumors that he has a torn labrum in his hip. And once the medicals go through for a trade, I'd imagine that will raise some obvious red flags. So Jack Flaherty, I believe, had trades turned down last trade deadline after teams saw the medicals. I would imagine the same would happen with Ozuna. Curious to see what happens with Luis Robert if the White Sox try to trade him, because there's a chance that Luis Robert has some underlying issues in his medicals. The one thing I do want to say, if you're on Twitter and you're talking about Ronald Acuna Jr. getting traded by the Braves, just stop. Just please stop wasting everybody's time. Stop wasting the air in the room. They're not trading him. He's on one of the most team-friendly deals in the history of the sport. $17 million team options through 2027 and 2028. The Braves are not trading Ronald Acuna Jr. Please stop putting it in infographics. Please stop tweeting about it. Please stop sending out these ridiculous trade proposals where the Yankees get Acuna and Joan Duran and also Royce Lewis. It's just baseball fans are some of the most unreasonable people when it comes to trying to figure out how to get players from one team to another. There's literally never any analysis of the contract and the money that these guys have remaining when people make up those trades. So just insane. I saw like a quote from Carlos Pena about maybe the Braves should trade Acuna. It would just be asinine. And this isn't trading Juan Soto, who's about to hit free agency and get a $900 million deal. And you still have this guy under control for 3 more years after this year. There's no way you could trade Acuna right now. So I think it's bullpen trades or probably bust for the Braves at this point.
All right. Take off your GM hat, put on your gambling hat. Let's get into your best bet here for Monday, Arizona and San Diego. You like over 8. And it's the Yu Darvish return here. He's back on the hill, but the question obviously is how close to 100% is that elbow? He battled inflammation in spring training. He landed on the 60-day IL. So now he's back, and you've had a really good handle on pitchers coming off of injuries and knowing what to expect, both in terms of pitch count and how deep they're going to go, in terms of innings. So with that being said, what are you expecting from Darvish here? And do you need him to go deeper given the fact that the Padres bullpen has been so solid, the second lowest ERA in the NL from a staff perspective this season? So what are you expecting out of Darvish and this pitching staff as a whole in this one?
Yeah, he only made one rehab start and he threw 51 pitches in said rehab start. He's coming off of elbow inflammation in spring training. He missed half of last year with hamstring tightness, and then he had personal issues, which kept him out a little bit longer. I'm trying to pull up his props for tonight just to see where the lines are at. But as I said, he threw 51 pitches in that rehab start in AAA, 4 strikeouts, 1 walk, and 4 innings. So the command is there. But normally when guys are coming back from this extended of an absence, you see them really ramp up multiple times in the minor leagues, progressing from A ball to AA or AAA. But at least typically 2 or 3, I would say closer to 3 or 4 starts in the minors where they ramp up their pitch count prior to coming back to the majors. And typically, too, they get that pitch count up closer to 65, 70, 75 before they come up for their season debut in the bigs and try to pitch closer to 80 or 85 pitches. So I can't imagine Darvish is going past 65 pitches in this game after throwing 51 in his first assignment. Over under of 3.5 Ks kind of indicates that would be the case. Trying to see where his outs prop is listed as well. But generally speaking, not only in terms of today's game, but then also for the remainder of this series, because all days of baseball are interconnected. How deep Darvish goes into this game could impact my ability to bet the over in the other games of this series, because the shorter he goes tonight, the more pitches the Padres bullpen throws tonight, the more tired they're going to be tomorrow, etc. And to the Diamondbacks' perspective, they have kind of been dealing with this and starter pitch counts and bullpen usage for weeks now, because they've lost their 3 best relievers, AJ Puck, Justin Martinez, and then over the weekend, they lost Ryan Thompson as well. And this is a team who has had a lot of tired relievers coming in, not that highly effective relievers, but also tired relievers coming in. And as a result, they've left guys. Torey Lovullo has left guys out there. He's received a lot of hate on social media. It's purely just been a pitch count thing where he's like trying to stick to pitch counts for his guys, get guys through the season, and not get anybody else injured because they've had so many pitching injuries there. So Arizona, 18th in expected FIP, 13th in strikeout minus walk rate. But as I said, and that's their bullpen, as I said, they are down their 3 best arms, and they just can't pull a quick hook with any reliever. And Zach Gallen, who's starting tonight for them, he's showing career worst underlying indicators in a lot of data points. His ERA, 5.5. ERA, not the thing we typically look at, but career high. 4.8 expected FIP, though. 12.5% strikeout minus walk rate. His previous worst expected FIP, 416. Previous worst strikeout minus walk rate, 16.4%. So not only down compared to his prior worst, well down compared to those previous worst. 98 pitching plus. Previous worst was 100. And his rest of season FIP projections still kind of project him as a league average pitcher. I would take the over on all those. He has a 4.422 expected FIP currently. His high rest of season FIP projection is 4.2. I think this guy is closer to a number 4 starter right now based on where all of the underlying indicators are trending into the mid 4s. And that pitching plus crawling below 100 shows to me Zach Gallen is trending towards a below average arm. Both offenses here are in their superior split. Diamondbacks are second against right-handed pitching. They also got Corbin Carroll back in the past week. The Padres are 16th, 101 WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Both teams slightly worse against lefties. But yeah, I think with Carroll coming back, I do lean towards Arizona in this matchup. If I got plus 120 or better on the Diamondbacks, I would bet their money line, but I prefer the over. I make this total about 8.75, 8.74. So take the over 8 and take it up to 8.5 at plus money. I bet over 8 minus 115 last night. You can actually get plus money today. This market has moved away from me, but I have found with totals, the COV hasn't mattered nearly as much for me with totals as it does with money lines. Generally speaking, when I'm off relative to a total on the market, it hasn't been like, anything concerning for me in terms of the hit rate. I'm just kind of going with my numbers on these. There are instances with ace pitchers where I'm, at times a little bit too high on the total market. But, when ace pitchers are in, they tend to set these totals a little bit low and entice you to bet the over. But yeah, beyond that, with no particular ace involved here, with no extended pitching usage for either starting pitcher and factoring in the Padres bullpen to a pretty decent chunk of this game, I still get this total up near 9. So hopefully we get this game to 4-4 relatively early and don't have to sweat it.
From your best bet now to your favorite underdog, the only underdog you like on your card here on Monday. The Tigers haven't named a starter yet, but they are up against Shane Baz, so we know what we're getting on that side of things. And it's been pretty advantageous to fade Baz when he has been a favorite in matchups this season because he can have starts where he loses the zone, gives up big innings. Now, granted, on the other side of that coin, when he's been dialed in, you look at 2 of his last 4 starts, absolute gems, albeit against a struggling Mets lineup and a below average collection of sticks there in Kansas City with the Royals lineup. As a home underdog, though, the Tigers are 6-4 this season, so it's been rare. But when they have, been catching plus money, they've been a solid bet this year. I'm sure you have a line into who they're going to name as a starter in a few hours here. How much does that matter to you in this matchup at plus 115? And is there a price point cutoff with the Tigers?
Bet them down to plus 105. I'm assuming Kiter Montero will get the bulk of this game for the Tigers, regardless of who they start in front of him, whether they let him start, whether they use an opener in front of him. I'm assuming Montero will go about 4, 5, 6 innings for the Tigers in this game, depending upon how effective he is. Has modified his pitch mix a little bit this season relative to last year. More sinkers, up from 8% to 21%. Fewer four-seam fastballs, fewer sliders, more changeups. Most importantly, ground ball rate for both Montero and Baz up about 5%. Well, for Montero, it's up about 6% year over year. For Baz, it's up even more drastically. It's gone up about 9% year over year, 9% versus his career. Baz also similar pitch mix adjustment, stop throwing his slider, exchanges the old curveball for a knuckle curveball. So under the hood, there's not actually a huge difference between these guys. Baz has the much better strikeout minus walk rate, nearly double, 8% versus 15%. But Montero, 4.15 expected ERA, Baz 3.8. Montero, 4.1 body ERA, Baz 4.09. Very similar pitch modeling metrics. I view Baz as obviously the better pitcher, more pitching upside, more strikeout potential. But the fact that Montero limits hard hits, I do think it's buried in his profile a little bit. 90th percentile in hard hit rate this year, also has a pretty low average exit velocity compared to everything else in his profile. These are 2 top 10 bullpens over the past month. I think the big difference for today's game, though, and what did get me to the Tigers here, the Rays bullpen just a little bit more overworked in their series against the Twins than the Tigers did against the Guardians. Pair of 1-0 games, the Tigers won, and then they went to extras yesterday, scored 6 in the top of the 10th. But ultimately, the bullpen didn't have to work too aggressively. They don't have a single reliever who worked on back-to-back days, and Tommy Conley would be the only arm today who has worked 3 times in 4 days, or who would work for a 3rd time in 4 days. And they used their B bullpen yesterday, as I said, even though they went to extra innings. Lee, Horn, Hernandez, the only arms they used on Sunday. Conversely, the Rays used Fairbanks and Ozer on Sunday. They've used Clevenger, Kelly, and Uceta twice in 3 days. So any appearance for those guys tonight would be their 3rd in 4 days. And they also used Mason Montgomery on consecutive days on Saturday and Sunday. So across the board, I think the Tigers just have a little bit more bullpen depth, a little bit more freedom to air those guys out, even behind Montero. And Shane Baz may just have a little bit of a longer leash because they need to rest that Tigers bullpen. So I make the Tigers slight favorites here, minus 105 on the money line, bet them down to plus 105. It went up from plus 115 to plus 120 this morning and then came right back down to plus 115. So I think the Tigers are the clear side here. We'll just try to get anything at plus 106 or better.
Before we get to Grant Neiffer's dingers on Monday, we're going to go through the rest of your card. We got 2 overs that you like. Let's start with Miami against Cincinnati. If the weather holds up, there's rain in the forecast, but if it avoids the stadium, it could be hitting weather in Cincinnati. You got wind pushing out to left center. The Fish are also sending Jensen Junk to the hill for just his 11th career start. And like Boz, his ERA doesn't truly reflect what you get from him on a nightly basis because he's been all about extremes this season. He started the year with 5 starts in the first 2 months in which he allowed 1 run or less, but he's blown up a few times just in the last month. The big thing for him is he peppers the strike zone, he doesn't issue walks, and his breaking stuff has been really good at times. So I guess my question here, with kind of, a boomer bust pitcher on the hill for Miami, since he is coming off of getting shut down in back-to-back games to close out that series against the Phillies, do you think their lineup can pull their weight and aid in over in this one with a number sitting at 9?
Yeah, Jansen Junk's been really good this year. But I don't see anything under the hood that suggests that he should be as good as he has been. And in fact, his hard hit rate is really high, 51% hard hit rate, which to me indicates that he's just gotten a little bit lucky. The arsenal is the same as it's been in previous seasons. He's just showing much better commit. 2 walks and 33 strikeouts in 37 and the third innings is incredibly impressive. But it's also a very small sample. And as I said, he has not modified his arsenal. He's a good slider. Slider is north of 100 stuff plus, but everything else is at 96 or below. And it's the same arsenal he's had for several seasons. He just has better command over it. But the hard hit rate is super high. And I do expect regression for Junk going forward. So even though he started out hot, even though the strikeout and walk numbers are really strong, I don't see any evidence for why he should have improved other than just having a good run of strong command. And command tends to be less sticky from start to start than stuff or velocity or anything else of that ilk. So, yeah, I think the Reds can score off of Jansen Junk. I think he has more upside than Brady Singer because I remain very down on Brady Singer. And I do think Singer gives up some runs to the Marlins here. As I talked about with Zach Gallen, Brady Singer showing career worst strikeout minus walk rate, expected FIP. 11% strikeout minus walk, league average closer to 13.5%, 452 expected FIP. His expected ERA has been around 465 for each of the past 2 seasons, but the other underlying indicators this year have declined along with it. And I think the most important piece here, and I'm curious to see if Grant has any dinger bets on the Marlins in this game, because I would start aggressively targeting against Brady Singer to give up dingers. Obviously, he pitches in the worst park. 4 home runs, plus 28% over the past 3 seasons. But this year, Singer's ground ball rate is at a career low, 35%, and his home run to fly ball rate is also, very fortunately, at a career low, just 9.2% right now, 13% for his career. So considering he's giving up more fly balls, they're just not leaving the yard as consistently as they used to. But in his new home venue, they should be leaving at a higher rate than they used to. I mean, his home run to fly ball rate should be pushing closer to 15% when he's at home rather than 13% for his career or 9% that it has this season. So I do think Singer is due and overdue to give up some dingers. Hopefully the Marlins can take him deep tonight. The Marlins offense has been really strong of late. They're top 10, I believe, over the past 30 days. They're 12th of the past 30 days, but a 127 WRC plus. They have a lot of guys who are between 25, 28 years old, all of whom are contributing. And I don't think they're as deep as the A's offense that we saw in the second half of last year, but they are very entertaining and young and exciting. And I make this total about 9.8. As you said, Mike, a little warm. There's a lot of humidity in the forecast as well. You know, if it does rain, that humidity is going to creep up closer to 80, 85%. So humidity should increase the batted ball distance. Very down on Brady Singer. And also the last piece that I mentioned, both of these bullpens rank in the bottom 10, both on the full season and over the past 30-day splits. So yeah, you're getting 2 weak bullpens, good hitting weather, good humidity. I like the over 9 year to minus 122. I'd lay a little extra juice on the 9, but you can take it up to minus 9.5 at minus 102. I would just prefer to lay more juice at the key number.
Another over between the Jays and the White Sox sitting at 8.5. Toronto is the second most profitable over bet in baseball, cashing 56% of over tickets this season. Jose Barrios could also get shelled in this matchup and make this a no sweat tale because he's been run off, giving up 6 runs or more in 2 of his last 3, or excuse me, twice in the last 3 weeks. Sean Burke, meanwhile, on the other side of this matchup, I know I'm risking Colin Whitchurch just showing up like Beetlejuice, just talking about the White Sox. He always wants to parachute in, but the 25-year-old has looked like arguably the best starter in their rotation recently. He looked absolutely dominant against the Dodgers in his last outing, and he's given up just 2 earned across his last 3 starts. But is he a regression candidate in your mind against this dynamic Toronto lineup?
Yeah, the Jays lineup is unfortunately they're lesser split here. They have been better against lefties than they have been against righties, but on the year, I think they've just been an underrated offensive group because they have a really strong process. They take a lot of pitches, they work opposing pitchers, they get deep in accounts, they'll go behind 0-2 an account and work it back to 3-2. I've seen Nathan Lucas do that so many times this season. So I just like the way Toronto grinds people down, not only in an individual game, but over the course of a full series. And I think by the end of any series, going against the White Sox bullpen that ranks in basically the bottom three by expected FIP or strikeout minus walk rate, again, both full season and past 30 days. I think by the end of a 3-game series, Toronto is just going to be beating down on that bullpen. But I think even today, good hitting weather, 76 degrees, 8 to 10 mile an hour winds blowing out to right field. You mentioned the Barrios piece. Barrios has basically overperformed his expected ERA for 3 consecutive seasons now by nearly a full run or a full run or more. He's overperforming it by a full run this year, 364 versus 476. He was at 474 last year with a 3.60 ERA. He was at 4.5 2 years ago with a 3.6 ERA. So yes, you could say eventually, what is Jose Barrios doing to continue to outperform his ERA? But his strikeout minus walk rate has been below average for the past 2 seasons. His stuff plus this year is at a career worst. It's at 91. His previous, and his body array is a career high 4.5. His previous career worst in those categories, 98 stuff plus, 3.9 body array. So I do think, or those are his career averages, I should say. So those are well down from his career averages. He has been trending down in recent seasons. I don't view him as anything better than a number 4 starting pitcher. You did mention Burke has been better of late. The rest of season projections, though, still view this guy as a replacement level arm. Average FIP projection of 4.8 over the rest of the season. The thing that I think gets buried in here with season long stats that does lend me to the over, and I make this 9.1. I bet the over 8.5 to minus 112. Toronto's bullpen was first by almost all metrics for the first couple of months in the season. Last 30 days, 30th in expected FIP, 27th in strikeout minus walk rate, 28th in body array. So I do think the Jays have significant need to go out and acquire bullpen arms at the trade deadline, potentially go out and acquire starting pitcher to help alleviate some of the usage off of that bullpen at the deadline. But, I maintained before that Yankees series, Jays a value bet to win the AL East. Have kind of said all year that this team is underrated and they keep chugging along. And a big reason for it has been their underrated offense and their underrated bullpen. But right now, their underrated bullpen, I think, is a little bit tired out and in need of some, pardon the pun, but in need of some relief to help them get through the rest of the year. So, yeah, I make this 9.1. I think the Jays bullpen can give up some runs late on over 8.5 to minus 112. And, this could be another, like I mentioned with the Padres and the Darvish pitch count stuff and potentially liking the overs the longer that series goes, depending on Darvish's usage tonight. Just keep an eye on the White Sox bullpen and how the Jays are able to get into it. First against a guy like Burke, who may not go as deep into his start. And then as you progress later into a series, I think some Jays live betting angles in this series, despite their bullpen being weakened, but like some live overs, some Jays live, could all be potential approaches considering the way their offense grinds teams down.
After 2 overs, you're flipping the script here with an under between the Dodgers and the Brewers sitting at 8. And an interesting trend with Yamamoto. In May and in June, he had back-to-back performances where he gave up exactly 5 earned and then 3 earned, but then he bounced back and looked dominant for the rest of the month. So since this recent skid where he gave up the 5 and 3, he's rebounded with 2 strong outings, 12 innings pitched, 14 Ks, allowing just 1 earned across his last 2 starts. I know you're very opinionated on Yamamoto in terms of where you think he slots. Is he a true ace? Is he someone who's, a top 20 pitcher in the bigs? Do you see him, kind of turning the corner and staying healthy and remaining dominant, or are you still waiting for the bottom to fall out, so to speak, vis-a-vis his expectations?
No, I think he's an ace. I mean, the underlying indicators, the ERA estimators are near 3 The strikeout minus walk rate is north of 20%. He's not a traditional ace, and he's not going to strike out, 10 guys a game. But what he does do is limit hard contact and does not allow home runs, particularly the second time through the order. You can ambush Yamamoto. He's given up a bunch of homers in the first inning. 13 of his 16 career home runs allowed are the first time through the order. He's given up a 695 OPS against opposing offenses first time through the order. Second time through, 495. I think he gets a little bit fastball reliant first time through the order and just leaves pitches out there for guys to turn around. And then he mixes in the secondary stuff more aggressively, second, third time through the order. So considering, I don't know if that's something that is going to maintain. I feel like having watched him, it might, because as I said, I think teams jump on his fastball earlier and then he moves away from it the longer the game goes. So, just keep in mind going forward, Yamamoto, second time through the order, is a major shutdown guy. And maybe that is a point to live bet Dodgers unders or to live bet the Dodgers in a game where they fall behind. I don't want to spend too much time in this under just because I believe it has moved down from 8 to 7.5. But I do want to mention two other points just because they may help you going forward. Number one, Freddie Peralta has looked much better in June than he looked in April and May. His ERA was low throughout the entire season, but in April, May, his ERA estimators were in the fours. He had an expected ERA and an expected FIP in the fours through May. 4.2 expected FIP, 15% strikeout minus walk rate. In June, 318. In June, 3.7, 21%. So he's increased the strikeout minus walk by over 6% in June compared to April and May. Stuff Plus is up 4 points from 101 to 105. Pitching Plus up 6 points from 102 to 108, and body ERA down nearly a half a run from 4 to 3.6. So I do think Freddie Peralta, even though he made the All-Star team, has a sub-3 ERA, he was the guy I was betting against in the first couple of months. Now I do think he is pitching much closer to what you would expect him to and is back in line with previous levels. The Brewers bullpen, too, I think can hold the Dodgers down. This is the number 3 bullpen, both in expected FIP and strikeout minus walk rate over the past 30 days. And they rank first in pitching plus and first in bot ERA over that span as well. So the Brewers tend to always figure it out with their relievers. They were getting shelled in that. I mean, looking back to that first series of the year, Brewers against Yankees, that seems like one of the more anomalous results. Not that the Yankees aren't good, but it does seem with all the barrels that they got and the torpedo bat stuff, that just seems like years ago at this point in hindsight, right? Because the Brewers bullpen can actually get outs now, and the Yankees are struggling offensively after the torpedo bat story unfolded earlier in the year. I think the Yankees missing the playoffs after the torpedo bat stuff would be absolutely hysterical. And, they're trending down very aggressively right now. So Yankees under preseason under win total back in play. Yankees to miss the playoffs, maybe not back in play, but much closer than it looked just a few weeks ago. But yeah, Brewers bullpen looking like a shutdown unit. And I could be wrong with my takes on the Brewers. Brewers to be a team that misses the playoffs. They just pulled it off another year where they were able to compile it together and figure out the arms. And even though David Stearns is now 2 years removed from that pitching lab and overseeing that organization, it looks like they have enough stability to kind of keep this thing going moving forward, especially when you consider, obviously, they have Churio, but if you're a prospect guy, you're aware of Jesus Mate and the other prospects that the Brewers have coming up. So I think this is just the beginning of a potential championship window for the Brewers. I'm not saying they're a championship contender this year, but I do think this team is going to be competitive for the foreseeable future. And when you consider the Cubs, how the Cubs look, the Cardinals rising core, the NL Central looks pretty interesting for the next few years. Apologies to Paul Skeens and Pirates fans because I don't think it's getting better anytime soon. I think the division around you is just getting much stronger.
We'll close out with the first place Phillies, who have a challenging West Coast road trip to end the first half of their season. It starts in San Francisco, and they're sending Sanchez to the bump. He's arguably been the Phillies' best pitcher the last 5 weeks. His ERA has been microscopic, and since the beginning of June, he's struck out more batters than he's allowed on base. Landon Roop, on the other side, is experiencing his best run as an MLB starter. Any interest in the under here? It could be cool and windy at Oracle Park tonight. Could end up dropping below 60 degrees by the back half of this game. So in addition to the Phillies minus 135, are you messing with an under?
Yeah, I would lean that direction. I'm not betting it. I didn't show any value on the total, but both teams are in their lesser offensive split. That said, they're in their lesser offensive split. They both got a batter back um, in the past couple weeks. Matt Chapman came back for the Giants. Bryce Harper came back for the Phils, who does help them in this particular split with the Phillies against the righty and the Giants against the lefty. So lean under based upon the season long splits kind of neutralizes me considering Hartmer and Chapman are both back in there now. The Giants bullpen and their bullpen usage would actually concern me a little bit too if I bet an under, because I think this is a game that they might let get away from them if they fall behind. They use their bullpen pretty aggressively to close out their series against the Athletics. Bivens, Randy Rodriguez, who made the All-Star team, and Taylor Rogers, who projects as their second best reliever, all pitched on back-to-back days. Camilo Doval also went 19 pitches on Sunday. The Phillies had Zach Wheeler throw a complete game shutout on Sunday as he pursues his first career Cy Young Award, starting to get himself into that conversation, even with as well as Skeens' pitch. But the Phillies bullpen should be much more well rested. And normally I would give the Giants a bullpen advantage. I do not give them one tonight. Now, Sanchez, a humongous snub from the All-Star game based on his stats. It's very tough to find who you would pull off and replace him on the roster with. Maybe Freddie Peralta. It's close. Like Sanchez and Peralta is really close. But I do view Sanchez as one of the best starting pitchers in baseball, and we've seen improvement from him this year. The velocity has gone up a tick across his entire arsenal. Sinker, slider, changeup, maintain the same arsenal. Stuff plus up from about 108 to 114 as a result of that velo uptick, which we saw in spring training, which he maintained into the regular season. And his expected ERA is at 3. His expected FIP is at 2.9, 19% strikeout minus walk. Plus, he keeps the ball on the ground at a ridiculous clip. It's really hard to imagine Christopher Sanchez getting hit hard in any start because he has such a high floor with the good command and the ability to keep the ball on the ground. You would really need to string a bunch of hits together against him or just have him be completely off on that day, I think is the much likelier scenario for how he would end up getting shelled. But yeah, the Phillies, I make about minus 155 in this matchup. So anything minus 136 or even minus, sorry, I should say my price target is at minus 142. I would probably even take this up to about minus 145. The rest travel advantage should be relatively even. The Giants had that rare Sunday night quote unquote game in Sacramento where I don't remember the last time. I don't remember this has ever happened, but it's warm. It's July in Sacramento. They weren't going to stick a day game even on a Sunday out there. They moved it to 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. So the Giants played late last night, have a relatively short turnaround today, but the Phillies had to travel East Coast to West Coast. I think you can sort of neutralize the travel and rest advantages against one another. So Phil's up to minus 145 or so, even minus 150. And yeah, if frankly, like the Phillies line, the Tigers line, those came out at 1 a.m. after all my totals had been in, after I wrote up this card. This is probably my favorite bet for today, especially in terms of a money line between the two. But yeah, of everything on the board, I think I prefer the Phillies. Money line is my best bet.
It wouldn't be a Monday Live episode without Grant Neiffer swinging for the fences. So open up your sports book so you can punch in the best numbers on his dinger card. Grant, take it away.
All right, thanks, guys. We got a 30% profit boost over on FanDuel. I'm using it today. I got a three-legger. I got it 195. I'll have to move slightly so you can get it over plus or over 200 to 1. Let's get right into it. Trevor Story leading us off here, plus 420 over on FanDuel to get a home run. Gets a matchup versus Gomber. The weather is great over in Fenway today. 84 degree to 86 degree weather throughout the game. 10-mile-an-hour wind blowing out. High humidity. Ball should be flying. And he gets a matchup versus Gomber. Gomber has been a splits neutral pitcher, but still is an above average matchup and allows more home runs to righties over the course of his career. Been a little bit better this year, but the underlying, or a little bit worse this year, is sitting at 2.25 home runs per nine to righties, but short sample size, and historically he's been a 1.6 home run per nine over the course of his career to righties. So plus matchup here. I know he pitches in Colorado for a lot of his games, and that probably increases that number, but still overall grades out as a great matchup for righty power. Story. Underlying numbers have been better this year, looking a little bit more like the Trevor Story we saw in the past. So overall, been very good. 14 home runs in 87 games. We're getting decent odds and a great matchup with great weather here. I'm rolling with it. Next up, Bobby Witt, plus 460 at the moment over on FanDuel. Witt gets a matchup versus Heaney, and Heaney has been better this season. 1.21 home runs per nine to righty, where historically he's been an absolute gas can for righty power. But we look at the underlying numbers, hard contact, fly ball rate, been fairly similar to him in the past. So at worst, he grades out as a fairly positive matchup for righty power. Ballpark is not great for power. Witt obviously has great underlying numbers, but hasn't had a ton of bombs this season. Due for some positive regression. Good weather over in Kansas City, high humidity, mid 80s temps. So his ball should be flying fairly well. I have the true odds of this around plus 400, so some decent positive value here. And lastly, Wyatt Langford plus 450 over at FanDuel to get a home run. Langford gets a matchup versus Kikuchi, who has been better this season. But the underlying numbers, fly ball rate, hard contact rate, both above his career averages. He's given up 1.21, I believe, home runs per nine this season to righties, but he's due for some regression. Always had a little bit higher home run to fly ball rate, likely due to that hard contact. Ballpark is a slight upgrade here for Wyatt Langford. Anaheim been, I believe, fourth over the last 3 years from StatCast ballpark factors in home runs to righties. So plus matchup here, plus weather slightly, and plus ballpark upgrade, and we're getting big odds. Even though he hasn't been great over the last month or so, the underlying numbers have still been decent, and he's due for some positive regression, and he's just far too talented to have numbers these high in a great matchup here. So parlay them all together, over 201 right now at the moment. I'm out of here.
That'll do it for today's episode of Payoff Pitch. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to tail some of the bets that you heard from Grant or Sean in today's episode, look for the quick slip links in the episode description. Don't forget to download the free award-winning Action Network app and leave us a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to the pod. And if you're watching live here on YouTube, feel free to give us a like, and also remember to subscribe so that we're always at the top of your feed. Also, check out the Action Network Discord. There's a link in the episode description of this podcast as well. We'll be back tomorrow with more Major League Baseball best bets, underdogs, the rest of Sean's card, and another guest to keep us fresh here at Payoff Pitch. For Sean Zerillo and Grant Neiffer, I'm Mike Calabrese. Thanks for listening to Payoff Pitch, Action Network's Major League Baseball betting podcast. And as always, best of luck with all your bets.